At exactly 9:27 a.m., the Fars news agency timestamp marked the moment that smoke began rising over University Street in central Tehran and the world changed forever. We are watching the opening stages of a massive coordinated military strike launched by the United States and Israel against targets across the entire Iranian landscape. The Pentagon has officially codenamed this multi-day mission Operation Epic Fury, while Israeli officials are referring to their specific involvement as Operation Roaring Lion. Explosions have already been confirmed in the major cities of Tehran, Isfahan, Qom, Karaj, Tabriz, Kermanshah, and the strategic port city of Bushehr. This is not a limited engagement because the Supreme Leader's compound in central Tehran was among the very first targets struck during the opening wave. Whose internet connectivity across the entire country has collapsed to a staggering 4% as the grid goes dark under the pressure of the kinetic and cyber assault. What the mainstream framing is currently missing is the sheer speed at which this escalated from supposed peace to total regional war. While news tickers are reporting the strikes as a sudden event, we found that the timeline tells a much more complicated and troubling story. On February 27th, 2026, Oman's foreign minister had publicly announced a major diplomatic breakthrough where Iran agreed to reduce its enriched uranium stockpiles. The Geneva nuclear talks involving Steve Witkoff and Jared Kushner had just concluded their third round with what appeared to be a path toward a peaceful resolution. Less than 24 hours after that optimistic announcement, the bombs began falling on the very sites that were being negotiated over in Switzerland. The United States had demanded the permanent dismantlement of Fordo, Natanz and Isfahan, along with the physical delivery of all enriched uranium to American soil. Iranian negotiators called these terms a form of regime suicide dressed up as diplomacy, and they were clearly proven right by the events of this morning. We have to ask what the Geneva talks were actually for if Pentagon planning documents from February 14th already described a sustained multi-day operation. An Iranian negotiator landing back in Tehran on the evening of February 27th likely read the optimistic Oman statement before waking up to the sound of cruise missiles hours later. This indicates that the decision for war had likely been made weeks ago, regardless of what was happening at the diplomatic tables in Geneva. The strikes have systematically targeted the IRGC infrastructure and every major nuclear research facility from Fordow to the mountains of Natanz. Reports are currently circulating that multiple senior IRGC commanders were killed in the initial precision strikes on their headquarters in Karaj and Tabriz. The question of whether the nuclear reactor in Bushehr sustained critical damage remains one of the most dangerous unknowns of the current hour. Iran did not wait to count its losses before launching a massive and multi-directional ballistic missile retaliation against its perceived enemies. Ballistic missiles are currently raining down on northern Israel, which has forced the entire civilian population into a state of emergency and shelter-in-place orders. The United States Navy's 5th Fleet headquarters in Bahrain was struck directly during the first wave of the Iranian counterattack. Al Udeid Air Base in Qatar, which serves as the forward headquarters for US Central Command, has also reported multiple incoming missile impacts. The air defense systems in Kuwait and the United Arab Emirates have been engaged throughout the morning to intercept drones and missiles crossing their airspace. One civilian death has already been confirmed in Abu Dhabi after an interceptor failed to stop a fragment from hitting a residential area. A senior Iranian official told Al Jazeera that every American and Israeli asset in the Middle East is now a legitimate target with no red lines remaining. We are no longer looking at a bilateral confrontation between two nations, but a regional conflict involving at least 6 different countries. While the military exchanges dominate the headlines, the human cost on the ground is reaching a breaking point that few are willing to discuss. Iranian state television is currently broadcasting that their retaliation will be crushing and has absolutely no ceiling for escalation. Contrast this with a statement from Donald Trump, who told IRGC soldiers to lay down their arms immediately or face certain death. This ultimatum suggests that the actual objective of Operation Epic Fury goes far beyond nuclear sites and toward total regime change. Long fuel lines have formed across Tehran as civilians try to evacuate the capital, despite the fact that the airspace is entirely closed to civilian travel. The Iranian people are caught in a nightmare scenario between a regime that has been killing them and a war that is now doing the same. Before the first American bomb fell, Iran was already in the middle of a massive student uprising that had been growing for weeks. Universities in Tehran, Mashhad, and Tabriz were hosting daily anti-regime protests with students chanting for a democratic republic. These people were not waiting for an American rescue mission because they were building a movement on their own terms and for their own future. Now those same student protesters are sheltering from strikes and watching their elementary schools collapse under the weight of the war. A girls' school in Minab was reportedly struck this morning, and the Iranian foreign minister has already used the event to claim deliberate civilian targeting. Trump told the Iranian people that their hour of freedom was at hand, but we must ask what that freedom actually looks like when delivered through a rain of fire. The people who were fighting for their own liberty just yesterday are now the ones most likely to suffer the consequences of this massive regional escalation. Khamenei remains alive, but his current location is unknown as the multi-day operation continues with no declared endpoint or exit strategy. If you want to follow this story as it develops, covering the retaliation and the fate of the Iranian people who were already fighting for their freedom before the bombs fell, the next video is already being put together, and it covers exactly that.